Alright, Section 5, Crankshaft main bearings, Harmonic balance or accessory drive gear, and crankshaft gears. Crankshaft gear. We'll go back to Engine Maintenance Manual number 252C, model 567C engine, 3rd edition, January 1957. Alright, I was wrong. Alright, Section 5, Crankshaft main bearings, Harmonic balancer, accessory drive gear, crankshaft bearing gear. Description: Crankshaft. The crankshaft is dropped. The crankshaft is dropped and forged carbon steel with a Dremel induction with a hardening with a drill patch with the crankshaft with a provide with a lubricating barrel and floated the main bearing crank connecting rod bearings figure 5-1 each with the crankshaft with dynamically balanced 16-cylinder engine crankshaft with a made with a two-section front with a rear joint with a coupling joined by a coupling. All others had one piece with the crankshaft like engine crankshaft with an interchangeable except for the 85673 567CR and the 8567C, which are not interchangeable. Flywheel flexible coupling. The main diameter armature for the effective of the flywheel from the engine is joined with the engine crankshaft means of a flexible coupling. Figure 5-2. Engine half of the disc, generator half disc compressed with a flexible coupling. Each of the discs is mounted with its center of the respective part of the flange and by 6 mounting bolts of the bolt halves of the joint with the rim of the outer circumference of the 12 through bolts, 12 bolts through the bolts. 12 through the bolts. The engine is support with the rim at a degree of the round with the circumference of the holes with the provide with the engine jack, turning bar with the rotating crankshaft 567. The engine flexible coupling is termed as serrated coupling with because of the arrangement of the junction with the two discs of the V channel that provide with the engine disc rim and the V serration. Show figure 501 shows the crankshaft oil bearing shaft. And then it shows the crankshaft end details and at the and generator coupling. We'll read that down real quick. 81. Alright, the generator disc rim of the this gives a self-centering unit with the seriation of the CTI with the sitting seriation of the sitting of the guide while the coupling of the disassemble the two types of serrated couplings are used in according with the engine application with using having of the 0.0 top dead center with the battery low with the right engine center line with the side with the pointer with the number 1 piston and with the top dead center other than coupling with the 0 top dead center mark left over the center line shown figure 5-3. Therefore the flywheel pointer location is different with it depending on the coupling use the separator generator fan is required and secure with the cap screw with and the rims with the generator having the disc noting similar early 567C engines work with the non-serrated flexible coupling run rim piloted. Your two-piece type of the coupling with the couplings have 6 with the reamed out mounting hole for the bolts with a 0.3 of an inch 16 by 8.740 and an inch diameter bolt with the rim not used with a serrated coupling point location with a 0 top dead center mark. These couplings are included in figure 5-3. Main bearing. The main bearing shall have the precision type with the steel back laid with the bronze lined with the lead of the tin overlay with the tangs of the bearing located with the proper axle position with the prevent the bearings turning with the upper half of the lower bearing shell with the lubricated shells are not interchangeable. Lower main bearing shells have 2 tangs with tangs on each side with which fit with the main bearing cap with the upper main bearing with the shaft have the 1 tang with the fitted with the groove with the right side with the A-frame bolt. Upper shells can be rotated in the direction opposite with the normal crankshaft rotation with the lower bearing and cap removed. Front and immediate bearings each of the type of the upper, lower, and smaller engine bearings with the rear main bearings and the same on all engine center bearings different with the 12 and the 16 cylinders with other engine center with the bearings of the 8-cylinder engines are intermediate bearings. For crankshaft custom thrust collar, the thrust bearings are solid bronze with a retainer cross section formed in the half circle with a placement in the counterbore seat each of the side of the center bearing A frame 8, 12, 16 cylinder engines on each side of the number 3 bearing A frame and the 6-cylinder engine are held in position with the bearing cap. The purpose is to absorb thrust and in dice. Show the flywheel pointing location. Design clearance between the face of the thrust bearing with the machine surface of the shaft of the thrust surface with lubricated above the main bearing leak off of the install with the thumb over the point oil depression away from the A-frame which are placed in the which are and that are placed. Your harmonic balancer. Okay, the harmonic balancer you with the engine 1216 cylinder 567Z engines and the 85763 CR engines function as the harmonic balancer for the dampens from torsional vibration of the crankshaft construction part of the harmonic balancer shown in Figure 5.4. The spring of the harmonic balancer receives oil through the radial passages and spring housing supplied within the crankshaft. In your harmonic balancer show the spring locating spring housing pushments and the oil passages from the crankshaft, coupling and snap rings. Alright, 556 accessory balancer driver gear. We'll write that one down too, 85. Alright, accessory drive gear. The accessory drive gear is bound with the crankshaft with the front with the harmonic balancer power with the gear with the tone with the gear transmit with the driving torque with the crankshaft with the pump with the gear with the governor drive gear with the front with the engine with the gear hub with the sum with the gear with the spring pack with each of the 8 mating spring slides with the whole piece with the construction of the alleviate the transmission with the torsional vibration with the gear with the spring packs are hub confined with between 2 discs and the 2 dowel through the hub with the disc with the secure with the assembly with the 2 safety dowels applied with the gear web extend with the enlarged holes over each of the disc and then with a complete with the spring pack failure with the safety valve contact with the disc with the key of the gear turning the engine should be shut down in such condition permanently in the event with a spring pack failure for proper repair with the lubricating oil supply with the spring pack with the crankshaft with the show with the radial passage within the hub of the oil slinger mounted outside with the accessory drive gear prevent the oil leakage of the crankshaft. Figure 5.6 shows the accessory drive gear. Alright, B, your maintenance crankshaft with inspection. Whenever the main connection rod being with the remove of the crankshaft, the journal should be inspected with the check with the scoring with the crank with the signs with the distress with the generally evidence first with the bearing crankshaft with the remove of the engine. It should be dimensionally inspected with the visually inspected with the magnet flux inspection if possible. The journals of the crankshaft with induction with the hard with the subjection with the excessive heat with the, from the lake with the lubrication of the region with thermal crack with the result with in most cases. Before any crankshaft with a half crankshaft with a 16 or half crankshaft with a 16 cylinder engine with the return with the angle flux inspected with the crankshaft cannot be reconditioned if their crank is over 1 inch long with more than 1/16 of an inch and deep in either surface of the main bearing with the crank pin bearing journal with any other journal fillet. The depth of the crank is determined with the grinding with high speed with the main machine fitted with the fine conical spaced conical shaped stone with the examination period with the shaft with the salvage maybe to return with the log range for recondition detail with the crankshaft with the return recondition factory build serve with the serve with the recover with the process with the regrinding with the induction with the hardening with the depth of the check with the necessary with the rehardening required with the special induction hardening equipment with there as in the recommended with the crankshaft with its return to the aid of the identification recondition crankshaft with the head of the journal underside with the requiring overside with the thrust bearing with the information with the same time the same check with the serial number the main bearing with the removal of the insulation all bearings with except for the rod bearings 6, 8, and 12 cylinder engines the 2 center bearings with the 16 cylinder engine with the removal of the inserting the upper bearing main bearing removing tool with the journal oil pass of the rotating with the crankshaft with the normal rotation upper bearing for the journals without the oil with the hole to remove the upper using a small piece of the brass spin push out with the bearing with the rotating with the crash with the installing with the upper bearing with the should be rotated with the position of the hold this will ensure proper alignment with the bearing of the tank with the do not install the removing the tool. Scheduled maintenance with the bearing removal of the lower bearing should be replaced with the intervals specified with the scheduled maintenance program with a particular installation with the removal that should be made with a complete engine set and step back upper bearings with the life expense with approximately 2 times with the located with the upper lower half of the upper half of the bearing should not be removed with the scheduled maintenance with the interval of the lower bearings unless the lower half of the bearing may be being removed should be signed and stressed. In which the case the upper half bearing should be removed with the inspection. However, the upper half of the main bearing should be inspected with the main overhaul periods and dimensional satisfactory should be cleaned up and reused. 4. Main bearing inspection. An interim inspection of the main bearing should only be necessary with the abnormal conditions observed with the engine, but this should contaminate of the lube oil due to dilution of the fuel and water, any other foreign material evidence of the later being lube oil filter screening with the engine oil pan with the situation arrived with the lower of the main bearing should be inspected. Visual inspection made with the dropping with the cap of the bearing, the lead tin overlay with the bearing with the primary provided with the leaking provided with the break-in proof of the fact of the part of all the other coating may have been worn away, but it should cause no concern. As long as the bearing shows to have the same relative appearance, if they do not under any circumstance reverse the bearing in the cap of the replacement individual bearing and distress should only be made after the inspection of other lower main bearings. The evidence that some of the lead of the tin overlay remain in loaded areas, one or more of the other with lower main bearings, the lead overlay worn off of the unloaded area. All lower main bearings are renewed with the upper insert of the proper crankshaft with alignment. And upon such inspection, lower main bearings should definite definite sign of the distress. Upper main bearings should be also examined using bearings not properly nailed with the reinstalled with the crankshaft of the journal with the other bearings with which is removed with the bearings that were applied with the ends installed with the original position relative to the rotate shaft rotation. Alright, 5 limits. When engine is torn down, the purpose of the main bearing trouble is necessary with the outline with the condemning limit with the other cases. These cases recommended the following rules for both upper and lower main bearing halves. Minimum wall thickness to any of the measured ball with the micrometer should be standards of the 3 minus 0.368 of the foot, undersize 1/32 of an inch, negative minus 0.38 of an 0.385 inch, 1/16 of an inch minus 0.3990, 3/32 minus 4.415, 1/8 of an inch minus 0.4305. Alright, your maximum wall thickness variation between the adjacent main bearing with which have the crank pin with the between them, this should be 2/1000 of an inch. Maximum level of wall thickness of the variation between the center main bearing with the 16 cylinder of the engine with no crank pin with the end within should be 15,000 of an inch. 6 undersized main bearing barrels shall be either 1/32 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, 3/32 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. Undersized. Your harmonic balancer should be inspected with the interval specified with the scheduled maintenance program of the balancer. Should be disassembled the ring and leave with the pack with the replay with the pushed in, down with the rotate with the press with a new contact strip to the springs on with the disassembly support with the balancer slightly above the wooden top of the workbench for the body. Use of the supports around the outer periphery of the spring with the housing with the use of the brass or with the other small soft metal drift. Slightly left of the diameter with the top of the push with the pin with the drive with the push pin with the top of the coupling with the drive push alternately 1800 making surface sufficient rounds of light with the driving each with the pin with the, until the top of the coupling with the free with the top of the coupling with the free. Repeat the driving procedure with the after supporting spring housing 2 to drive the push pin with the spring pack with the housing. Repeat the procedure on the bottom couple. The coupling should be identified with the whole of the ring parts of the give. The harmonic balancer used on all production with the engines provides spring housing with the taken with the engine housing holding hub shoulder instead of the spring pocket thrust pin with the spring housing hub shoulder wider balancer spring bear to, prior to using the balancer with the thrust pins if they have been shortened. The harmonic balancer springs have been wider since shoulder can be identified with the marking of the D for a dynamic balance stamp adjacent with the front of the marking with the housing with the important with the short length with the thrust pin with the wide should be shoulder spring housing with the short pins can be identified 1/60 of the end of the deep groove with the round with the 1/2 of the end of each with the point with the short pins with the half with the having the grooves can be U with the prior narrow with the shaft shoulder spring housing balancer with the long ungrooved pins that did not be U with the wire shoulder spring housing. Otherwise, assemble the both of the balancers same. Alright, examine the common components of the balancer, smooth with the roughness of the boards, particularly with the spring housing and thrust pin, with the end push pin, with the replace with the thrust pins having the flat, so exceeding 1/8 of an inch wide with the long spring, looser with the spring, with the house, with the gulf, with the ends, with the other, check with the thrust and the end, this equal heights above each side of the spring house, with the overside with the thrust bearing. The mounting dowels are available, but over push pins are available to check 1/2 of the thrust pin impression with the coupling interface with the replace with the couplings having the impression exceeding 2/100 of an inch depth. All impressions are allowable. The depth must be blended. This should not be occur with a harmonic balancer. Checks surface of the spring surface near the spring housing. And I forgot to read this. Dry push pins, spring packs, housing replacer, bottom coupling. Alright, circumference spring housing for an ununiform wear and central figure flexing spring housing if wears exceed 500 of an inch depth with a replaced outer spring with a spring leaves and spring pack for the galv replaced with new packs throughout with clean oil passage coupling drilled oil passage and spring housing. In preparation, reassemble the lightly file with the coupling counter and contact strip with the 2 oil passages to remove any burns of the roundness placed in the coupling. Alright, a wooden top of the bench for the drive push pin with a plate for the t-shirt for the previously worn surface will not be with the position with the contact with the spring, use the white lead or other suitable lubricant with the push pin ends. Play for the housing with the coupling with the side mark the front with the apply with the spring pack with each of the side with the push pins 82 to 84 spring lead with the required with each of the pack with the height with about 4 pounds and 5 1/4 ounce of the stack leaves when applying with the remove any over the length of the short length over the other width of the allow with the compare with the majority of the other lead with the leads. Do not vary with the thickness of the spring with the same with the clearance of the bolt side with the relationship with the thrust pin with any with the pack with the several leaves with the normal required but they must match better at the end of add leaves when checking with the attempt of the leaf removal of one assembled once assembled the leaves can be added by starting one corner of the leaf with the tapping of the pack with the working along with the top of the leaf with all the steel of the reamer. After all the packs are about the right quantity that can have been applied, each pack should be gouged at deflection and figure 5/7 apply with the gauge shown figure 5/7A to check for the clearance between the strings and the gauge block with the position with the A, but there is not to be any clearance between the gauge block and the springs. However, it is due to apply the pack with the minus several springs leaves in the first check with the blare we likely with the clearance make with the check with each of the pack and one indicate with the more clearance of the opposite side. Insert the leaf inside of the leaf for the clearance if the clearance still exists. Add the leaves to each of the pack until there's no clearance between the gauge block and springs which are pushed in position shown figure 5/7A with the gauge bar ends with the clear with the thrust of the pin of the gauge has held. And two, so the center block contact with the spring with the one end of the bar with the contact with the thrust pin with the figure 5/7B and C. There should be at least 100 of the clearance between the opposite of the bar with the end of the thrust pin with the clearance should also be retained with a gauge bar with the contact provided with also 100 of an inch clearance. Should remain in the most cases will not exceed 100-inch clearance due to the varying of the thickness of the added to the lead. The following the proceeding with the gauges gauging sequence of the unpairs the spring pack diametrically opposing starting pack with the repeat the sequence of the adjacent packs until the pack so have been engaged in the proper quantity with the spring and leave the add with the recheck all spring pack with the use upon completion with the spring pack assemble the plate for the remaining coupler over the assembly with the oil gauge that is matched with the cleaning all the burrs on the rough lead with the hub of the raw head with the mullet with the press with the few force lubricated with the top of the push with the pins respective the holes with the coupling with the drive and the coupling with the dowel downly evenly with the contact with the shoulder with the push pin with the marking location oil passages coupling hub and add insulation from the valence for the crankshaft oil passages line up with the match for the oil hole and crankshaft the rave with the assemble with the coupling clearing with the bench using the sling with the mounting holes clear check with the clearance between the mounting of the flanges at 10,000 of an inch. A feeler of 15,000 of an inch should not enter between the mounting flange. It does not form. If it does form particle of the bolt or burrs are present with the flange, which will require the assembly of the disassemble the balancer to clean. Also with the balance for the inspection with the proceeding with the paragraph checks for the clearance between the top of the spring pack with the coupling with the 100-inch feeler should pass between the coupling and the spring pack, if the feeler does not press with the tap of the coupling slightly above the pack with the raw hide mallet. Sometimes checking with the feeler with the procedure will provide with the necessary cleaning with the by taking the assembly during the assembly to ensure the equal with the height of the thrust band with above each side with the spring housing. It will not be necessary with the crank thrust band and to coupling to clearance. Prior to installing the Harmonic balancer, cleaning even the air blast with the remove of the foreign particle with the oil spring with the engine oil with install with the crankshaft with the front with the tamp facing you apply the washer with the under of the mounting bolts of the torque value the mounting bolts mounting bolts in 400 foot-pounds. Accessory drive gear assembly. The accessory drive gear assembly should be inspected in intervals specified with the scheduled maintenance program at the time of the complete with the engine overhaul. The check with the gear with the teeth with the crack, rough with the scuff with the cords over the C with the magnet with the instruction 1754 with the magnet plug for the engine gear with the examine the spring slot condition for the gear knee with the be replaced with the spring slot condition with the flash rod with the driving side with exceed 3/8 of an inch with and in the length of the gear may be reversed to carry out of the opposite of the side, but therefore it is not necessary to replace with the gear until the wear has occurred on both sides with a spring slot. Accessory drive gears with the hubs may also be used for providing flash blocks of spring slots not exceeding 3/8 of an inch long, with the hubs may also be reversed as a gear with a hardened device for the accessory drive gear that should not be required with the maintenance for the other cleaning in the portable surface wood smoothing the different phase. After each rebuilding of the accessory drive gear with the spring pack should be replaced with no attempt to be made with assemble the pack with the spring lead with the S of the spring pack with the slot with the clearance is very important with the control of the factory assembly with the spring pack with the clearance of 3,000 to 9,000 of an inch. However, the the clearance should not be measured. Assembly with the measuring of the spring pack thickness for determining the clamping the fixture of the spring of the not oiled. The maximum accessory drive gear with the check of the gear to a hub clearance with a maximum of 1/100th of an inch from the shimmer of the dowel of the hit and snug, if not ream with the oversight of the drill with the be sure all the cleaning of the well oiled, installing of the gear and hardened washer for the under mounting of the bolt heads, eliminating the score of the oil single ensure the bolt better tightening torque value accessory drive gear with the crankshaft, the mounting of the bolts at 250 pounds. 250 foot-pounds. Flexible coupling and crankshaft gear. The following instructions should be used in lineup of the series with the type of the coupling with the main generator line with the given the generator. Maintenance and instruction of the gap between the engine generator coupling habit should not be less than 5,000 in the gap. Measure of the midway between the bolts must not be uniform with 2,000ths of an inch. Alright, around the coupling joint with the give of the bolts of the you must also use within the will be 3,000 inch or 5,000 inch left between the bolts of the care should be taken with the tighten all of the bolts with the uniform with the devoid of the cocking with the coupling and the seriation torque value of a 3/4 of an inch 16th the coupling rim bolt at 295 pound with the engine disc of the series with the coupling with the interchangeable provide with the top center pointer location with the end the engine same also with the engine having half couplings that may be aligned with a different generator the clip of the seriated coupling diff there are no ream body is bound bolts fit with the seriated coupling on the 567 C with the coupling engine. All rims and bolts the same side with the no overside of the bolt and the hole with the issue with the rim with the lineup with the number 1. Center molting bolt with the number 1 crankshaft with the bolt with the piston. Agree with the marking with the run of the line with the 0 top dead center 1 piston is in the top center with the all this mark with the 0 inch with the mark on the crankshaft with coupling position with the coupling disc with the crankshaft with the upon the installation with the coupling of the disc with the crankshaft with the face with the running with the rim concentricity should be checked with eccentricity of the rim take with the main machine groove with the not exceeding 5,000 of an inch of the TLR top to the left TLR run out of the rim face should not exceed the 25,000 of an inch for the TIR track rimming when track rim running on there should be taken on the position of crankshaft with the void thrust interface coupling of the crankshaft mounting bolt with the around ground original of the assembly provided with the dowel with a 1.75 foot through the reamed holes into the crankshaft of the gear with the flange with the preventing oil with the leakage for allowing with the bolts and where the bolts pass through the coupling disc of the bolt diameter 1.74 thousandths of an inch, 740 thousandths of an inch with a 1.75 inch drive hole with the coupling of the flange with a 100th of an inch. Difference between the bolt diameter of the disc of the mounting hole with the disc of the mounting hole with the diameter allowed with the coupling with the disc of 1.780 inch or maximum clearance is 0.4 thousand inch when 1.740 of an inch. Diameter bolts is used the 1.7817 inch diameter coupling mounting bolt would be reached with generally with the favor of the coupling with the disc large overside with the coupling with the bolts of the U of the engine therefore with the U of the other mounting bolts of the clearance whether or not with the obtained with the ream of the body bound with fit with the coupling of the bolt was not required with the engine disc however the ream the fit with the required or at the crankshaft flange crankshaft gear with the mounting bolts the coupling disc the engine bolts with the is standard side with the ends available at 5,000 inch increments until 3/300 of an inch for the diameter with the path through the crankshaft with the flange of the gear and the coupling disc diameter then they can be used in 567 series engine coupling diff the torque value with the coupling bolt nuts is 1,200 foot-pounds. It should be noted the engine generators returned with the unit exchange shall have the coupling disc removed all the unit exchange engine generators provided with the current design with the coupling of the bolts details of the crankshaft gears are given them in figure 5.2 with the crankshaft gear assembly reamed and originally assembled to ensure with the snug fit with upon installation any time of the snug fit should be maintained with between the coupling of the bolts crankshaft gear with the sling shaft lane with the ream for oversized bolt with all the parts and assembly should be carefully examined for burr for the holes and bolts are numbered in a number to a the reassembly backlash between the crankshaft gear with the first idler should be between 1/7,000 of an inch and 14,000 of an inch limit of 30,000 of an inch also crankshaft gear teeth pitch diameter bell portion of the gear should be concentrated with the crankshaft journal at 4,000 inch TIR. And then it goes over the specifications. Now we're on section 6. Crankshaft, camshaft, gear train, camshaft assembly, timing, and overspeed tripping. Testing.